It's a pleasure to see so many wonderful, beautiful, smiling faces. It's been a little bit of a problem getting through the jet lag, but I think I've finally made it. And they've asked me to speak a little bit about myself, and that could take about a week or so. I love talking about myself, but I'm going to try to keep it a little bit to the point. I started, so that you know that Joe Blasco actually does exist. You know, many times you have, let me see if I can walk away and still have this microphone work. Is it good? You still hear me good. You know, when I was very young and I was just beginning to discover the world of makeup and makeup artistry, there was the name of a company. It was called Max Factor. And to me, for all of those many, many years, the name Max Factor simply was a product. It was makeup. I never realized that there was actually a man by the name of Max Factor until later in my teens, and I began to read information and to understand that the name Max was Maximilian Factor, and it was an actual man who created makeup and was a makeup artist to the stars. It's ironic that my own career has followed the Max Factor career, and my cosmetics company has more or less followed in the steps that Max Factor followed, inasmuch as I will meet people who will come up to me and they will say, "Oh, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I use Joe Blasco." It's like, okay. You use Joe Blasco, yeah, right? Well, my name in the United States and probably around the world has become synonymous with makeup, professional makeup artistry, just as did, and I may humble myself in saying, that it, like the Max Factor name. But there have been many other names as well that have come before me and that have paved the way for me. I was very, very lucky to, when I was young, in my late teens, when I arrived in Hollywood, California, to be able to get into the Hollywood scene, into the Hollywood studios, just at the time that all the older men were about to retire, all of the older master makeup artists. Ben and I Sr. at 20th Century Fox, William Tuttle at MGM, George Bow and Gordon Bow at Warner Brothers, the Westmores, by Westmore Universal, Rudy Horvatich at ABC Television. These are names you probably don't know. But these are my teachers. And just as I have become a teacher, these were teachers to me, and I have carried on the work that they had done all of their life. And now my students, and there may be one or two of you in this group who may have attended my school, now you will carry on the work that I have done, or that I have invented and created and nurtured and practiced and tried to make so that the standards of the makeup profession would not just simply be maintained as it was back in the early days when the profession would go from father to son to son to son to son, father, son, father, son. It used to be that way, but now, because we have a school, because our school has become so famous, and because the school has very famous teachers and professional makeup artists who work there, we are now able to bring new people into the profession, new artists, young artists, who are then able to go out and to teach the new principles and techniques of makeup artistry. When I came into Hollywood, I was 18 years old. I had $250 in my pocket, and I was working for the Max Factor company. Ironically, the Max Factor company, the company that I loved so much, I wrote a letter to them, and they accepted me as a trainee makeup artist for traveling around the country. So I thought to myself, they're going to send me a ticket, I'm going to go to Hollywood, they're going to train me, and then they're going to send me back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to work in a department store. I don't know about that part, but I like the part where they're flying me to Hollywood for training. So I accepted, of course. They flew me to Hollywood. I went through my training period, And then the day came when they wanted to send me back to Pittsburgh because I was going to be their makeup artist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, working in the department stores and demonstrating Max Factor makeup. And I went up to the head of the sales department and I said to her, a lady, her name was Donna Wayland, I'll never forget. I said, you know, I really dreamt all of my life to work for the Max Factor company. And now that I've been here and I've had training and now you have me here in Hollywood, you want to send me back to Pennsylvania? I'm afraid I'm going to have to withdraw and leave the Max Factor company. And she pulled me aside and she said, you know, we've watched you work and we really feel that you shouldn't go back to Hollywood, to Pittsburgh. We feel that you should stay in Hollywood. She said, this is the first time that we've ever done this, but we are going to permit you to cash in your plane ticket and take that money and to stay in Hollywood. Because I came from a very, very small family, a very poor family. So when I cashed in the plane ticket, I had $250. Putting money down on an apartment, back in those days, this is 1964-ish, $50 down on the apartment, $50 deposit for security, and then another $50 for fixing and cleaning and whatnot. I ended up with $50 left in my pocket and no job. I wasn't working for Max Factor anymore because they didn't want me in Hollywood, they wanted me to go back to Pittsburgh. So I instantly got a job working. I'm telling you this so that you can see that it was not an easy way up, all right? And it isn't easy for any makeup artist because it is an art and it's something that you do with your hands. It's a passion, it's a love, and it's not something actually that you can be trained to do if you do not have the love and the passion and the dedication within you. If you have the love and the passion and the dedication and the desire to do makeup and to be a makeup artist, then we are able to take that talent that you have, that you've been blessed with, and we can train you and mold you and make you into a makeup artist. But we can't just take anyone off the street and say, okay, you're going to be a makeup artist. What's that, you know? So in being in Hollywood and having this desire and this passion and this love for the profession, I got a job selling magazines with the Life magazine company, Lifetime magazine. I looked in the newspaper, jobs. Well, what could I do? I couldn't do anything. The only thing that I knew up to that point in my life was makeup. Since I was 7 years of age, that's all I did was makeup. I used to go into the bathroom at my aunt's house, my mother's sister's house, and I'd go through the drawers and I'd find the eyebrow pencils, the Maybelline eyebrow pencils, and I'd draw lines on my face, right? And then I would go downstairs in the cellar where my grandfather had his plumber's putty, and I would put plumber's putty on my nose and on my forehead, and then I would walk around like this, you see, and I almost gave my poor grandmother a heart attack one time. But it was then that I knew this is how young I was, and when I discovered makeup. And as this grew and grew, I definitely knew that this was going to be the profession for me. So back to Hollywood, I had only done makeup all these years, everything, and I was fresh right out of high school. I had done makeup for the TV studios while I was still in high school because I looked older. I was a young person that looked older. And I was lucky to look older, actually, because when I was a freshman in high school, I was doing the makeup for the senior high school plays. And the seniors thought that I had come in from the university to do their makeup. So, of course, I didn't tell them, no, I'm a freshman, I'm 2 years under you. So here I was in Hollywood, and I needed a job. I'd only done makeup to this point, and there was in the newspaper, it said a salesman wanted Lifetime magazine's telephone sales. So I thought to myself, telephone sales. That's interesting. I think I can do that. But I had something else going on in my head. Who am I going to call if I get on the telephone? Now, I'm sure that you can all figure that out real quick. Ben Nye Sr., William Tuttle, all of the heads of the makeup departments at all the studios. So when I started working on the telephone, I would call them and I would say, hello, Mr. Tuttle, my name is Joe Bell, because we weren't allowed to use our real name. My name is Joe Bell, and I'm calling you because I work for the Lifetime magazine company, but please don't hang up. Don't hang up because I'm really a makeup artist. And the answer was always, oh yeah, right, you're a makeup artist. Well, just tell me about why do you think that you're a makeup artist? Well, that was the beginning. Once they asked me that question, I had them on the telephone. Not only did I have them sold on makeup and on me and wanting to invite me into the studio, but I actually sold them magazines also. So this is how I got into the studios. And I would call them and I would go in, I would meet with them. But I was too young and they couldn't hire me because back then the union, to be a member of the union as a makeup artist, you had to be 21 years old. And I was still 2 years too young, actually 3 years too young. And so I would go into the studio and I would sit in the corner and they would allow me to watch them work. And that was a thrill because I got to see all the big stars and all the big performers from the old days, from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And then once I began doing makeup, at ABC Television and at Universal Studios and all the other studios where I worked as a freelance makeup artist and at CBS Television, I then saw these same stars again and got to do their makeup. So it was not an easy climb to the top, and I honestly don't know where the top is in makeup artistry. I feel that if you feel that you have arrived to a point in your life as an artist where you feel that you know everything that there is to know, then at that point I think you really should close your makeup box and put it away. Because makeup artistry, as any other art, is unending and unlimited. You can continue to learn constantly and constantly. If only what you're learning is validating what you already know. That is very important because if it validates what you know, if you're learning something and it validates your already existing knowledge, then you can take that awareness and be creative with it and change things, invent new techniques and new ways of working. And this is what I did when I worked as a makeup artist. And also, when I started as a makeup artist, there were no schools for motion picture and television makeup. And I remember a letter that I received from Bud Westmore, the head of makeup at Universal Studios, and in his letter he stated, there are no schools for professional motion picture and television makeup. Sure, you can go to a salon and you can learn how to put eyelashes on. Ladies would go to a salon and learn how to put liquid makeup on and, street makeup, but there was no school for professional motion picture makeup. So I thought to myself, well, that doesn't make much sense. There's no more apprenticeship program. How is it going to be possible for the art of makeup to advance and to continue if there are no schools for makeup artistry? So after having worked at ABC Television, at CBS, and having freelanced and done a tremendous amount of little independent horror films and hundreds of television commercials, I was sitting one day in the auditorium for the Academy Awards, and I was assistant to the man in charge, who was Rudy Horvitich, and we were about to do the makeup for the Academy Awards show, and what he did not know was that I had already taken out an ad in the paper that said, become a makeup artist. Learn from one of Hollywood's finest makeup artists, head of makeup for, and then I listed all of the shows that I worked on at ABC and all of the stars, and the ad was about that long in the newspaper. And I was sitting in the audience, very much like this audience, and by myself reading this newspaper and reading and checking the article, my first ad, to see if I could start a school, to see if anybody would call me on the telephone and want to learn makeup. And Rudy, what I didn't know was that Rudy Horvitich, who was the head of makeup at ABC, a wonderful man, who was a father to me, he came and he sat down next to me, and I did not know what the man had planned for me, but he, deep in his mind, he had hoped, I found out later, that I would succeed him and be his successor at ABC Television. So he was grooming me to take his place. But I didn't realize that. I was young, and I was passionate and gung-ho, and I wasn't satisfied, and I wanted to start this school, and there I was reading this newspaper, and down he comes and he sits right next to me. So he says, "What are you reading?" And I said, "Oh, there's a thing here about a makeup school." So I folded the paper, and I handed it to him. And I looked at his face, and his face went from this to this. And I knew then that my school would be successful. Because I knew that if he was that distraught over losing me, that he knew that whatever I would do well. And that man assisted me in building the school, because once I had built the school, and by the way, within 1 week after I had put this ad in the newspaper, there were 12 calls to become makeup artists that wanted to become makeup artists. So what I did was I quit my job at ABC. That was unheard of for anybody to ever quit a job as a makeup artist. I quit my job at ABC Television, and I began to teach. 1 week after I quit, every production company that was at ABC, all of the shows that I was the head of the makeup department for, all called me back individually, because they would call Rudy Horvatish, and he would say, "He doesn't work here anymore." And they would say, "Well, what do you mean he doesn't work here anymore? We need him to do our show." So I went back to work at ABC, but this time, not as a staff employee at ABC, but I went back to work as head of the department for each individual show. So rather than making $150 to $200 a day, which was the rate then, I ended up making $500 to $800 to $1,000 a show. And we would do a different show each day. So by quitting ABC, I suddenly had a school that was successful, and I had been rehired by every production company at the studio, and I instantly made about 10 times more money than I was making as a staff makeup artist. Well, needless to say, honestly, I wasn't thinking about the money, and I wasn't thinking about the monetary and material aspects of it. I was thinking, the only thing that would run through my mind was that I was actually doing what I loved to do. I was able to work as a makeup artist in the studios, be head of the shows, do makeup, but at the same time, I had my own business, which I had to juggle the schedules. If I worked at ABC in the morning, I had to teach at night. If I had to work at ABC at night, I had to teach in the morning. So I was constantly on the telephone, again, calling all of the students, telling them, well, our class tonight is going to begin at 8, and we can't do it in the morning. And then I'd call the next day, and our class tomorrow is going to be at 7 in the morning. I had to constantly juggle the schedule, because I chose to continue working as a makeup artist, because I felt that it was very important that if I were to have a makeup school, that I must continue working as a makeup artist in the industry in order to have credibility. So this went on for about 18 years. And I taught and I worked, and taught and worked, until the gray hairs started to come out. And there's a young lady that came up to me downstairs, and she brought a picture of me. She showed me this picture. Where are you? There you are. Bring that picture down here. Come on down here. This picture she claims that this picture was taken 10 years ago. Well, in this picture, I have, just to show you what this kind of schedule will do to you. I don't know if you can see this or not from up there. This is my old building. Thank you. What is your name? Monica. Thank you. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
This is, I'll hold this. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Look at that dark hair. Look at those long sideburns. Look at that big smile. Well, the smile is still there. And I had a ponytail too, a little ponytail that came down around the back here. very, very artistic. But do you mind if I pass this around, Monica, so people can look at this? All right? So what I'm saying is that, now that's 10 years ago. I shudder to think what I'm going to look like another 10 years if I keep up this kind of schedule. But there is nothing better than doing what you love to do, even if it imposes tremendous hours on you, having to work unusual hours, long hours, having to work with difficult people. I honestly don't think there are any difficult people. There's only a degree of understanding that you as an artist must have in order to be able to understand how to work with people who you may classify as difficult. I worked with a lady by the name of Lauren Bacall. Do you all know the name Lauren Bacall? All right, Lauren Bacall is known in the business as being a rather difficult lady to work with. And the story that I have is that I was very young, about 22 years old, 23. I was working at ABC, and she was coming into town to appear on the Academy Awards show. And nobody wanted to do her makeup. Every makeup artist in town had been called. Rudy Horvatish, the head of makeup at ABC Television, did not tell me. I didn't know. I was the last to hear about this. But he didn't tell me that he had called at least 10 or 20 makeup artists, and nobody was available. Or if they were available, they wanted $3,000 and $4,000 to work with her. Well, that's something that I learned later when I got a call to do Zsa Zsa Gabor, and I told her, no, it's $3,000 to do Zsa. No, thank you. So to make a long story short, I was called in to do the makeup on this older woman. They didn't tell me who it was, and I had to take my makeup case and I had to go to the hotel where she was. And I went and knocked on the door with my makeup case, and she opened the door, and I guess the look on my face was one of like this. And it wasn't because I recognized her, because I didn't. I didn't recognize her. Nobody would have recognized her. All right? You better be very careful where you play this tape, by the way. And she looked at me and she said, well, what the hell are you looking at? It doesn't get any better. And I said, oh, no, Ms. Bacall. I said, it does, and that's why I'm here. And she got a big smile on her face, and she says, oh, she says, I think you and I are going to get along pretty good. Come on in. So I went in, and we opened up the drapes, and I put a chair in front of the window, and I started making her up. It took 3 hours. And I was still working on her when we got to the theater. I have another little story that I'll tell you, and I think it's interesting. I'm giving you a little history of my background. I was working with Ben Nye, and there was a Ben Nye, by the way. And there still is a Ben Nye Jr., who is a good friend of mine. And in fact, he uses my makeup. He has nothing to do with his father's company. His father's company is run by a man by the name of Dana Nye, who is his brother. And I also worked for the Ben Nye Company. And the Ben Nye Company is a very good company as well. And I got my best training from Ben Nye Sr., the old man, all right? And back in those days, he had a very small studio. And this was right after we had done Planet of the Apes and Hello, Dolly. The original Planet of the Apes, not the one that Rick just did, but the original, the one that John Chambers did. And we had just done, when I say we, I'm speaking of 20th Century Fox, the film Hello, Dolly with Barbra Streisand. And I was very lucky at that time to be able to be apprenticing with Ben Nye Sr. because he was teaching me how to make makeup. Because at 20th Century Fox, they would make their own makeup. They didn't use Max Factor makeup or any of the other lines of makeup. It was strictly all manufactured right there in the studio. So I was very, very lucky because Ben Nye had just retired. He had just done Planet of the Apes. And so it was at that time that we were making makeup. And Ben had retired. He had his own little shop on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood. And I worked in the back room mixing makeup and pouring makeup. And we had a table, and we'd put all these containers all around the edge of the table. We'd mix the makeup, and then I'd go around with a little knife and a beaker and do this and pour the makeup into every little container. That's how his company started. In fact, I still have some of the original makeup pours that I did back in 1966 and 67, 68. So I was there for 3 years. And so one story, before I go into the Joe Blasco Makeup Center a little more in cosmetics, that I think you'll enjoy, is that it was in the back lab. And this was in the 60s, you know, the days of hippies, and they would paint, you know, all the flowers and all the things on their VW vans, Volkswagen vans, and long hair, and I had real long sideburns, and my hair was down to here, and he would keep me in the back room. And they had these beads that would separate, hanging in the doorway, right? You remember the bead? Well, you're all too young. You don't remember any of this. So, well, anyway, he had a little bell on the front door, and when the bell would ring, somebody would come in, and the bell would ring. So every time the bell would ring, I was curious because he had a lot of stars that would come and go. And the bell rang one day, and I peeked through the beads, and they made noise, you know, and he said, "Get back in there, get in there." So I got back in. But I saw this lady come in, and she was dressed in leather from head to toe with the motorcycle helmet, right, with the little pins, and she had the breeches, you know, with the side thing here, right, and the boots up to here, you know, she looked like very Gestapo, right, and she had a riding crop, like she was on a horse, you know, the stick that you hit the horse with. She put it under her arm, walked in like this. A very older woman in her 70s. And behind her was a very young woman, very beautiful, dressed exactly the same way, identical. But she was young and she had long, flowing blonde hair, but she had a riding crop too. Right? So the girl sat against the wall, and Mr. Nye had the older lady sit in the chair, and he began to do her makeup. He wasn't feeling quite well that day, and he continued to come out of the makeup room, through the laboratory, and into the restroom. And then back out of the restroom, through the laboratory, and back to do her makeup. And this went on again, and again, and again. And I thought, what's going on in the bathroom? So needless to say, he wasn't feeling well. And he finally came to me and he said, he was perspiring, he said, "Do you see the older lady out there in the chair?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Just go finish her makeup. Just go do her makeup. And give her anything she wants. I'm going to go lie down." So I said, "Okay, Ben, whatever you say." You know? So he went, he lied down. And I went and I introduced myself, and she sat there like this, like a statue. And I did her base and did whatever I needed to do, and I taught her, and I showed her how to work with the product. Well, I thought that her makeup had been almost finished, because he had worked on her for about 45 minutes, almost an hour. And when I went there to see her, he had just put a base on her. Apparently they had been talking and talking and talking and talking. I don't know, she wouldn't say a word to me. I don't know what they were talking about. So anyway, I did her makeup, and I gave her all the products, put them in the bag, stapled the top of the bag, gave her the bag, and then she smiled and she said, "Thank you, young man." That's all she said the entire time. And like, she didn't smile because it was like she thought her face would crack if she smiled. So they went out. The young lady opened the door for her, and she went out, and I looked through the window, and there was a motorcycle there with a sidecar. And the young lady opened this door to the sidecar, and the young lady opened the door, the older lady got in, sat down, closed the door, and then the young one got on and boom, got this thing going. I'd never heard a motorcycle so loud in my life. And they went boom, like bats out of hell, up Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood. Wow. So I was just, a young kid fresh out of Pittsburgh, so I had never seen anything quite like that. So I went back into the back lab, Ben came out of the restroom again. And I said, Ben, who was that? And he looked up at me. He was sitting down. He said, you know, you just made up Marlena Dietrich. Oh, do you know what I would have felt like had I known who I was making up? I didn't recognize her. She was an older woman. But what a thrill to know that I had the opportunity to work with such a fabulous star. There are many experiences that I have like this. You know, I could talk on and on and on and on and tell you all about the wonders of being a makeup artist in Hollywood. And the situation here is, however, that we are here to learn a little bit more about makeup and not about me, per se. Now that you do know that there is a real live person behind the name Joe Blasco. And, you know, and every now and then, people will come in, they'll come into my studio, and they'll tell the people that work for me, they'll go, is he still alive? Well,